Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's recording of the Hospitable Hosts podcast. I'm Miles from the marketing team here at Hospitable. We are an Inc. 5000 company that gifts hosts their short-term. We are an Inc. 5000 company that gives short-term rental hosts their valuable time back. Joining me today is Tim, CEO of Buoy. Buoy provides practical revenue management advice for hosts and managers. Tim is here today to talk about STR pricing and common revenue management mistakes. And most importantly, how to avoid them. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. First question I always like to ask our guests is, where are you calling in from?
Yes. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Nice, lovely. And how's the weather there? It's starting to turn a bit wintry now, or?
A little bit. There's a crispness in the air. It still definitely feels very fall-like. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful. I can understand why people like this part of the country so much.
Sweet, nice. And is that home for you? Or is
It
this
is.
kind of,
It is.
yeah?
So I spent the last 5 years in California, and we recently moved here because my wife and I just had a baby, and this is where her whole family is. So it's got the pull of the generation. So we're new transplants to the DC area.
Amazing. Well, congratulations, first off then.
Thank you.
Cool. So let's get into it. Let's start with a bit of background on yourself and why you know about revenue management. We want to show that you're an expert. So
Yeah.
you've had a bit of a career in revenue management. Maybe just kind of take us back a bit. What is your story, Tim?
Yeah, so I actually started as an Airbnb host more than 10 years ago now. Airbnb was like just getting off the ground. I had a friend who, had taken this trip to Boston, and he was like, hey, man, like I paid for my flight by renting out my place on this site called Airbnb. And so I started looking into it. It looked really cool. It was like first a side gig for me, and then it became a full-time gig. And I grew my own portfolio. That was all in Chicago, back in the day. And then I left that behind to join Oasis. Oasis at that time had about 2,000 properties globally. And initially I was launching their Chicago portfolio for them. But lucky for me, Hyatt invested. Hyatt was based in Chicago, and they really liked the way that I approached revenue management. So I asked them for some formal training, went through the big program that they do with Cornell University, and I've been focused on revenue management and pricing ever since.
Awesome. Sounds a great journey.
Yeah.
So how about Buoy itself? When did that start, and what exactly do you do? What are your services?
Yeah, so it started in 2019 officially. Around 2018, I was leaving Oasis. They had sold to Vacasa. And so I went off to do my own revenue management thing, just, pricing independently for people. And I realized that there was a lot of frustration in the industry with the tools that existed at that time. And I thought that I could build something better and something simpler. So we spent from 2019 through 2020 building the product, and then have spent the time since then really refining it and expanding it. Initially, it was only for people who had more than 100 properties. We served a lot of really big enterprise level users. But then over time, my heart has sort of grown towards the entrepreneurs at the other end of the scale. People with fewer than 5 properties, sometimes even people with 0 properties who are just trying to get started. And so the company has been shifting more towards that segment in recent years.
Amazing. I think you will find that majority of our listeners are in that sweet spot of 1 to 5 properties as well. That really is the area that Hospitable kind of specializes in. So I'm sure you'll have lots of those listeners wanting to hear more about your service today.
Great. Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
I didn't answer your question about what our services are. We have automated pricing. So we have bots and AI that will read the market conditions, assign you a comp set, and determine, say, look, based on what your property looks like, based on how it's performed in the past, we think that you should be priced here on these dates out in the future. And it really takes this view of, all right, when somebody's shopping for homes in my area, what are the other homes that are showing up realistically when they're shopping for mine? Where are they priced? And how can I make sure that I'm always in line with them? So that way it becomes more about offering a really high quality product as opposed to trying to get really specific on pricing and looking at last year and trying to forecast and all of this stuff. No, we can really simplify it by looking at who are your direct competitors, who are the best performers in the market and how are they performing and how can we emulate their success.
Amazing. And in terms of the hosts that do come and work with you, is there a certain kind of point in the journey that they do typically come and reach out to you for help? Are these people that are already well established? Are they kind of new to the industry?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to go about it. Sometimes people will be frustrated. They'll be like, Price Labs is too complicated. Like I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need help. But then there are a lot of people who are just looking for something for the first time. And there's this window of usually it's like right when they're starting to get the photos together, when they're putting their listings together.
Okay.
That's the first time that they start contacting us. And then that window goes all the way out to when they receive their first couple of reservations, and those reservations were lower than they initially thought. So like that's the window when people really reach out. But if I'm being honest, the beginning of that window is too early and the end of that window is too late. And there's one specific time when you should really be focusing on pricing your listings, which is like the moment you're ready to turn it live. Like when you are ready, you have all of the photos taken, everything's curated, everything's ready to go. Pricing should be the very last thing that you do before you hit publish.
Okay, well, that's a great tip, just straight off the bat there. I love that. And then in terms of so revenue management really has quite a lot of parts to it, realistically. Maybe let's just kind of get back to basics before we get into kind of some of the common mistakes. What is revenue management to you? What is your definition of revenue management, I guess?
Yeah, so it's just pricing your listings. So putting prices down on the calendar that will attract the highest possible yield, and then reporting on your progress so you can know how you're doing. It's really just those two things.
Simple. Good. I like it. And then really, the main topic area that we want to talk about today, the title of this podcast episode, is basically those common mistakes around revenue management. So it sounds like maybe timing is one of them, but let's maybe dive into that a little bit more and talk about some more of the mistakes that you see people making.
Yeah, so timing is definitely one of them. People know that pricing is like a conceptually complicated thing because you're like, I don't know what all of the high value dates are. I don't know how to like gauge those versus the other dates on the calendar. And so they like it occupies a big place of anxiety in people's minds as they're sort of getting everything set up. And really the thing that you should be focusing on is getting your listing in perfect condition, taking the most perfect photos that you can, like, because that at the end of the day, like that's your product. And the price is really just part of your advertisement. So like focusing on the wrong time definitely can be a big distraction. The other sort of really big problem I see people encountering is they overcomplicate. And they think, okay, well, I really need to be monitoring the market every single day. I need to be looking at several years of historicals, and then I need to be forecasting and trying to accommodate for like industry growth or like, all of a sudden, like there's more homes in the market this year. So how should that be impacting my price? That's like almost all of that is, I don't want to say worthless, but it is indicative of a time when we as an industry had worse visibility into our market conditions. And so we were trying to use all of these metrics to like triangulate on a perfect price. And then as soon as something in the market changes, like all of that goes out the window and like you have to do all of it over again. I can tell you, like, if you're thinking about going down those lines, throw it all out. You don't need to do any of that. What you really need to do is just figure out, okay, where are the listings similar to me? Like, where are they priced? And how do I want to position my home relative to them? Like a lot of places, everything's high on 4th of July, everything's high in New Year's Eve, those kinds of things. Great. See where they're priced. Try to determine where your listing is in terms of quality relative to them. And then, with a bunch of time in the booking window, put yourself up near the top. Like there's still lots of time. And as the booking window is like really closing, well, then bring your rate down relative to them. That's really all that you need to do.
Amazing. So really, the golden rule there is don't overcomplicate things. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of data out there, but it's quite simple, really. You're only competing against a certain number of people in your area. People often set on where they want to go. They're just choosing which, stay out of maybe 3 to 5 places realistically.
Yeah. And, I recommend that people look at a comp set of like 25 listings, maybe up to like 50 listings, because a lot of those are going to get booked up as the booking window closes. And so if you start with 50, you're going to end up with 5 by the time like the day of arrival arrives. But really, you just need to be in the mix. Just be like similarly priced. And then from there, it's about making sure your communication is really strong. Your reviews are really strong. The photos are high quality. Like the bathroom drain correctly. Like those are the hard and not reducible parts of the process that really that are really going to be the difference maker in terms of your earnings. When it comes to revenue management, I just recommend that people stay in the mix with their comps, and that they really only go in and look and adjust like once a week. It's like truly especially if you've only got one listing, you shouldn't be spending more than like 30 minutes a week, like really thinking about your pricing. If you do, you're going to overcomplicate it and you're going to like hang yourself with too much rope.
Yeah, that's essentially costing you time and money. Essentially, if you're spending too much time trying to figure out pricing, right? You could be doing more important things, taking better photos or writing, nicer guest replies, or I don't know what, but something else to kind of boost those reviews, basically.
Yep.
Amazing. So, why do you think that? And maybe it's misinformation, but why do you think that people do make these common mistakes? You've talked about a few there that you see people making with revenue management. Why do you think hosts, have these errors? I assume you see people time and time again, worrying over pricing for most of their week kind of thing, or they're trying to price their property before their listing's even ready to go out into the world. Why do you think that happens?
Well, it feels very complicated because there's 365 days on the calendar. And so there's just a lot of prices to put down, and then, you've got to change them at some point, but you don't really know like exactly when. And then if anything in the market changes, like you've got to do that again. And so and then also because you can't really cancel your reservations, and preserve superhost status or whatever, the stakes are high. And so people tend to like really overthink it and get like way down into the weeds. The other thing is, Airbnb and the other OTAs, they really try to hide where everyone else is priced, because they don't really want people going in and focusing on price and like, really fine tuning against their competitors. So like for a long time, it was very difficult to see where your comps are priced. There was like unknowable, or you'd have to pay a ton of money or like hire a revenue manager like me to figure that out. But over the past 2 years, all of the dynamic pricing systems have like really good forward-looking competitor rates. They'll all give you some sort of a comp set. They all have like 365 or more days of visibility. And so everyone now should have these tools accessible to them. And so it's just a matter of saying like, okay, I saw this podcast with some guy 5 years ago where I heard, I went to some seminar 5 years ago and they were talking about historical trends and all of this stuff. And so I feel like I need to do that. But really, like if you're using Buoy, like we just have the comp set pricing there. If you're using Price Labs, you really just need to like go into that neighborhood data tab, and all of the answers are going to be there. Still, like all of the tools have like 500 other like levers that you can pull. It's just like you don't need to pull them. Just like leave those alone and only focus on where all of your comps are priced.
Okay, that sounds good. And then what about when we're kind of comparing different channels? So you kind of mentioned there Airbnb, other OTAs, OTA being online travel agencies, different booking channels like booking.com and Vrbo. What about pricing differently between those different channels?
Yeah, so one common thing I see people do is they do like a little rate inflation that matches the different commission amounts on the different channels. So I do recommend that. I think that's a smart thing to do. The other thing that you need to do in terms of like differentiating your pricing is use the discounts that are native to the OTA. So like go into Airbnb and put in like special promotions, go into Expedia and use their special promotions, because but like keep pushing like the same raw rate to all of those channels. Um, whenever you do that, you get visibility boosts on each of those individual channels, and they are the best way to ensure that your home gets booked. So I don't necessarily want a different price on each channel, because like at the end of the day, a dollar is a dollar.
Yeah.
But I do recommend people utilize the native discounts in order to maximize their visibility on those channels. And one other note: this isn't exactly what you asked about, but sometimes people come to me and they're like, "Oh my God, like I feel so worried. I'm getting 90% of my reservations from Airbnb, and then I only get another 10% from Vrbo. Like, what is going on?" That's really not that big of a problem to me. Like, to me, that looks like, okay, so your listing has done so well. You've gotten so many views, you've gotten so many conversions that Airbnb is pushing you up to the top of the search results, and people are responding. Great. So you've done a great job on that channel. And then by extension, that's eating up the calendar. So when you give that calendar then to Vrbo, there are way fewer nights available. Which means you get fewer views, fewer conversions. You end up falling in the page rank there. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. And if you only have 1 to 3 properties, you don't have enough calendar to have a big presence on all of those platforms, because like as soon as somebody books New Year's Eve, well, that's like the peak night, and so you're just not going to have you're not going to be able to book it on a different channel. I think that we get advice, or we look at Sonder or Casa, any of those like really big operators, and we see them as super professional. And they're like, oh yeah, we've got this unit mix where it's like pretty even from Google and from Vrbo and from our own direct booking, but like they've got 2,000 listings, and a lot of those listings, like they've got 50 units that all have like the same one listing that's on those properties, because they're all like nearly identical one beds. And so they have enough inventory in these nights to be able to show up on those channels. It's something that the big platforms can do, and the small platforms struggle a lot more with. And I know that it can be nerve-wracking to think about like, oh, I've got so much riding on this one channel, and if I get delisted from Airbnb, then like everything's gonna collapse. But like Airbnb is not going anywhere. And unless something huge happens, like some regulatory issue, or like if you were running your business the wrong way, then you're at risk. But that's true for all channels. So I say if you're crushing it on one channel, celebrate that, and don't try to like damage your success on one channel to improve it on another one.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's fair to say that actually, for hospitable hosts listening, I think if you were to go and ask the majority of our customers, they'd say that actually, in the most part, it is just one channel that's winning. It's probably Airbnb most of the time for them. And so really, for any listeners that are worried about, most of their eggs being in one basket, you're not the only one in that boat. I think a lot of people in that situation, that's just how it works, as Tim so expertly described it. So yeah. And then just kind of on channels, obviously Hospitable, we have our kind of direct offering, allows people to build their own direct booking website, and with kind of the protections of guest screening, damage protection built in. We also have the ability for hosts to kind of add promo codes to their site. Mm-hmm. Pricing for direct versus Airbnb, for example. What are your suggestions around that? Should we be kind of essentially discounting there to try and undercut our Airbnb listing? The commission is lower anyway, so we're going to be getting more of the revenue as is. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of success in that, you sort of count on the OTAs adding a 15% commission. And so if you want to compete, then add just like a blanket 10% discount on your own site. And then already you're going to be earning 5% more. But, let's say you're showing up in Google results or something like that. Well, you're going to be the cheapest option. And so like I tend to practice price parity, with the exception of like your own direct channel, like make a really small discount. But it has to be in the same range. You can't have two different prices, because for me, I would always look, like if I find a home that has its own website, Like it's got to have a ton of reviews and a ton of a ton of market validation in order for me as a consumer to trust it. Because I know that if I book on Airbnb and something goes wrong, Airbnb is going to have my back. They're going to help me get rebooked. They're going to like take care of the refund, all of that stuff. If I'm booking directly, there's some chance that the home I'm going to book is a scam or something. And so I like it damages my faith in the product. And so what I do is I look and I see, and then I try to find the same home on Airbnb and say like, okay, is this listed other places? Is this legit? And if it is, then I'll go ahead and book. But it can be really helpful, especially if you have a super singular property, like something that doesn't exist other places. I work with a guy who has a gorgeous, like full on mansion, like wood paneled walls everywhere, 6-bedroom mansion on a PGA golf course. And he's the only one, he's like the only one who has that kind of property at that golf course. So naturally he gets a lot of like repeat visitors. And so once a group of guys like plans their August golf trip to that PGA course and stays in that singular property, well, they're going to want to rebook the next year and they're going to tell their friends about it. And so the property does the work that you would normally be counting on Airbnb to do, which is like gain you exposure and get you guests. So I feel like direct booking channels are really, really helpful if you have a super singular property. But if you're opening up like just a normal 1-bed in an urban area, then like it's probably going to have some diminishing returns for you because you can't compete against Airbnb in the same way.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense. Those repeat bookings definitely one for direct for sure, because you are going to, take all that money basically. You don't have to give Airbnb that commission, right? And you already know that person, that guest, so it makes sense to try it through direct.
Yeah,
for sure. So then getting on to kind of Buoy again, and 2024, it's just around the corner. Scary, I know. But we've recently kind of integrated Buoy with Hospitable. What else is coming down the pipeline? What's new for you guys and what's coming up?
Yeah, so honestly, this is a huge priority of mine. My goal for 2024 is to serve 1,000 different early stage entrepreneurs.
Yes.
We've worked with 10,000s of listings in the past, but those tended to be with the larger companies that had like large portfolios. But I want to work with 1,000 individuals who are getting started on their entrepreneurial journey and help them achieve their dreams. It's so, I don't know, it's a really different experience, like for me, helping an individual achieve. And like a lot of these people, they're cashing out their 401ks or they've saved up like a ton of money and they have a lot riding on the success of this one place. I bought this home in Bradenton, Florida. I bought this home in San Diego. And like, this is going to be the place for me. I'm going to go take 2 vacations there a year. And then other than that, it's going to be like my side income. I really, really like helping those people and like being a part of their entrepreneurial journey, as opposed to like, the big guys, they're great for business. But at the end of the day, like if you think about where the money goes, it's going to go to a private equity firm or something like that. And that just like doesn't warm my heart in the same way. So 2024 is going to be the year of the individual for us.
I love it. And then generally, what's your thoughts on the industry as a whole in 2024? We love to kind of get our hosts to kind of do a bit of future gazing. Mm-hmm. What do you think we'll see in 2024? We've obviously this year, I'd say we've had a lot of news around advocacy stuff. A lot more restrictions coming in place. Do you think we'll see more of that, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a byproduct of the industry maturing. And ultimately, I think it's a good thing. It's obviously not a good thing for some hosts that get their industry regulated. But we've shown that if we can organize and we can make a strong case to governing bodies like this, you can prove that this is an industry that helps like individuals and residents of a certain city. So I think that like more of that is going to happen. And so you just need to do a lot of research on where you're investing and make sure that, okay, there are established laws on the books. there is a legal pathway for me to open and operate this business, and you have some legal protections against, complaining neighbors or something like that. I think there will be more of that until it becomes like a much more commonplace, heavily regulated thing. We've seen a lot of unit growth. Like more and more units are going onto the platforms, which means that in a lot of places you see like market occupancy down, even though travel itself is up. And from my perspective, that gives an advantage to the individual owner because their properties tend to be larger, they tend to be more striking and singular, and so they have a product-based competitive advantage versus some of like the really big operators, people who are coming and like opening up 100 listings at once, 500 listings at once. It's like if you're looking at those head to head, generally the property that's opened by an individual who fell in love with an area and like renovated a home themselves and decorated it themselves, like that's the home that's going to get booked because it's just a superior experience for the guests. And now that the tools have also become a lot more mature, like, I talked about founding Buoy because like I was pretty frustrated with the existing tools 5 years ago. Well, those tools are pretty good now. They've all like made a lot of the same adjustments that we integrated into Buoy. And so the same pricing algorithms, the same PMSs, all of that stuff that the really big guys have, the small guys also have available to them. So we may see lower occupancy and we may see like lower industry-wide RevPAR, but I see advantages for people who have unique and striking homes.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. Unique and striking. That's what everyone should be striving for, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. Tim, final question. Very easy one. If people want to find out more about Buoy, where do they head to?
Yeah, go to buoy.us, buoy.us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tim. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I've loved chatting with you. Hopefully our listeners have enjoyed it too.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.